Welcome everybody, this is Mr. Ndabezita, and this time we will be looking at chemistry, and I have prepared some slides which I believe will be very much essential in showing us the way in which we need to look at things. So we have chapter 1, which is the essential ideas in chemistry, and I have taken these pictures as a way of helping us to understand the importance of chemistry in our lives. So in figure 1.1 we read, or in this slide, chemical substances and the processes are essential in our existence, providing sustenance, keeping us clean and healthy. For example, we have these washing powders and so on. We have purifications, we have cell phones, we have coffee, and all of these things. Right. Fabricating electronic devices, enabling transportation, and so much more. There's chemistry behind all these things. Okay, and then we have the credit for the modification of work, and so on and so on. So it is important, first of all, that we note that chemical substances are processes that are essential for our existence, even the very infinitesimal, the very small particles that makes up the very big human beings that we are. So this is chemistry. We need to understand what really entails in the world of the very small, the infinitesimal, the microscopic view to the microscopic view of that which becomes visible in our eyes, and everything begins in the world of the infinitesimal. So these chemical substances, which are very small in nature, almost invisible to see, these chemical substances and the processes that are involved are essential in our existence. For example, in order to have this substance that makes it possible for us to clean our bodies and our hands, there are a millions of trillions of atoms that combines in order to have these things that we have. For example, for myself to be the person that I am, there had to be dozens and billions of atoms that combines in fixed ratios, in good orientation and angular hybridization, in order to bring about the changes that are necessary, that we can be able to see with our visible eyes. So the chemical substances and the processes are essential in our existence. That which happens in the world of the very small becomes visible in our eyes, and they play a significant role. So in order to understand that which we see in the visible eye, it's so much important that we draw back and look at the world of the infinitesimal, because we are big beings made up of very small material, almost invisible to the naked eye. Okay, this is just an opening slide trying to show us that they provide sustenance, keeping us clean and healthy, fabricating electronic devices, enabling transportation, and so much more. This is the chemistry of life, in a sense. Okay, that is fine. I will assume that we have understood that. Let's move to the second slide, the introduction. Now, the scientific method of doing things. Chemistry is a science based on the observation and experimentation. Now, immediately you have a problem with me there. If chemistry is the science based on the observation, I mean, how was it possible that they saw that there is an atom via a microscopic view? So chemistry is the science based on the observation and experimentation. So first of all, in chemistry, we observe things for what they are. Observing simply means looking at the mechanisms that makes up the object that you can see with your eyes. So you are observing something, you are studying the substance, and you carry out experimentations in order to verify that which you have saw, what makes it to behave in that way, and what are the constituent elements that makes up the material or the object of interest. Doing chemistry involves attempting to answer the questions, because obviously when you are observing something, there are questions that you are asking yourself. Why is this in this way? Why do we see the spectacular birth and death of certain materials when this is happening? And so on. So chemistry involves attempting to answer. So we are trying by observation, we are trying through experimentation to do what now? We are trying to attempt to answer the questions and explain the observations, that which we see. We are trying to explain that in terms of the laws and the theories of chemistry. So when we look at something, here is a substance, for example, here is hydrogen, and we are looking at this substance which we call hydrogen. We are very much interested in this hydrogen that we are observing, and we want to carry out experimentations in order to get a detailed, clear description as to what makes up this type of an atom and why is it unique from the rest of the others. So we are attempting to answer the questions that we are having based on the observations that we have, based on the experiments that are carried out, and we are trying to explain these observations in terms of formulating laws and the theories of chemistry. Very important, because chemistry deals with the reactions that are happening behind the scenes, using procedures that are accepted by the scientific community. So the theory that you bring to the scientific community has to be accepted. This is a theory that I have, and then you carry out experimentations based on the observations, and if what happens in the experiment matches the law, then that will stand. It simply will stand. So we are therefore saying we are using procedures that are accepted by the scientific community. All right. There is no single route to answer or to answering a question or explaining an observation. And this is very true. It makes a lot of sense that there cannot be one way of answering a question or explaining an observations. When you observe something, you can try and explain this in different ways, because when you have a substance, here it is, because of what you saw and because of the experiments that have been carried out, you will have more than one, or you will have more than single route in answering the questions or explaining that observation, obviously. But there is an aspect common to every approach. There has to be a common ground through which, even if we can explain this in different ways, but this has to emanate from this source. So we are therefore saying there is an aspect common to every approach. Each uses knowledge. You see the approaches now, the aspect now. Each uses knowledge based on the experiments that can be reproduced to verify the results. Very, very important. So the experiments are there to verify that which we have saw, whether by experimentation does it match exactly that which we saw, or does it match exactly the law that stands. Some routes involve the hypothesis. This is just a scientific statement that can be proven right or wrong. A tentative explanation of the following. So some routes involves the hypothesis, just a scientific statement that can be proven right or wrong. I can say that this is behaving in this way because of that. I haven't yet carried out any experiments that verifies that. I'm just making a hypothesis, a scientific statement that can be proven right or wrong. Right, so some routes involves a hypothesis, a tentative explanation of chemistry in the context observations that acts as a guide for gathering and checking the information. Okay, that it's fine. And a hypothesis is tested by experimentation. Now remember, this hypothesis is just a statement that it is a scientific statement that you make before the experiment can be carried out. So it is just a scientific statement that can be proven right or wrong based on the experiment and the results that we have gathered. Therefore, we can justify whether the hypothesis stands or it does not. So a hypothesis is tested by experimentation, and the calculations and or the comparison with the experiment of the others, and then refined as needed if there is a need to refine them. Some hypotheses are attempts to explain the behavior that is summarized in laws. And this is very true that some hypotheses, some of the scientific statements that can be proven right or wrong, are the attempts to do what now? To explain the behavior that is summarized in the laws. So we have the laws that tells us that this behaves in this way because of that. Therefore, we are having these hypotheses trying to do what now? These hypotheses are the attempts to explain the behavior that is summarized in these laws. So the laws of science summarize a vast number of experimental observations and describes or they predict some facet of the natural world. If such hypothesis turns out to be capable, if these statements that can be proven right or wrong before the experiments are made, which we call the hypothesis, if they turn out to be capable of explaining a large body of experimental data, it can reach the status of a theory. Scientific theories are well substantiated. Very important that we note that scientific theories are well substantiated and comprehensive. They must be testable explanations of particular aspects of nature. Very, very important. Scientific theories are well substantiated, comprehensive, testable explanations of particular aspects of nature. Theories are accepted because they provide satisfactory explanations. So the theories stands, or we accept them if they provide a satisfactory explanations. We accept your explanation of why this is so. So because of that, via the experiment that was carried out, therefore the theory stands, it is a satisfactory because it has been able to explain that which is visible, or the way or the mechanism through which the object behaves. But they can be modified if new data become available. Now, because remember we said that there are many ways in which we can look at these things. For example, the laws of Sir Isaac Newton have stood for quite a very long time, and the theory and the laws of Sir Isaac Newton stood at that time until a time came when somebody had a different perspective of the very same things which Newton brought about, which was Albert Einstein. So we are therefore saying to you, and this is very, very important, but they can be modified if new data becomes available. So when new data comes available, the theory that stands based on the calculations and the experiment that were carried out needs modification. If this was a theory and the calculations were made to test the theory and the experiment were conducted and it was acceptable because it was satisfactory in terms of explanations, then when somebody comes and the theories now needs a new modification because a new data is now available, therefore we will have to modify, if not to get rid of the theory. The path of discovery that leads from question and observation to a law or hypothesis to the theory, combined with experimental verification of the hypothesis and any necessary modification of the theory, is called the scientific method. Very important. The path of discovery that leads from question and observation to a law or a hypothesis to theory, combined with experimental verification of the hypothesis and any necessary modification of the theory, is called the scientific method. So we are therefore saying the scientific method is a process. It is a path. You are walking on a path of discovery, and through the journey that you are on, you are observing things, and in the observable world of this thing that you are observing, you are carrying out experimentations, you are making hypotheses based on the results and the calculations that you have found, and the journey, the process throughout this that you are trying to establish at the end of the day, we refer to that as the scientific method. Basically, this is what we are saying. Right, and then in figure 1.4, I tried to summarize things in this way. Right, now first of all we have the observations and the curiosity. So you first of all have the observation, you are seeing something and you are being curious about this, you are jumpy, you want to get to know what is happening. And then secondly, what is happening, you form the hypothesis and then you make predictions, because that's what a hypothesis is. It's a scientific statement that can be proven right or wrong. So, and then from there, what is it that is happening now? Now, next is you perform experiment and make more observations. So from the hypothesis, you just keep on making these predictions. And then you have the results which are not consistent with the predictions. So you can have the results that are not so consistent with the let me just do this first. Okay, let us continue in the story. I was disturbed a little bit. So we are saying you are making observations and you are curious, you are jumpy, you are excited. This is something that you want to achieve. And then secondly, you form the hypothesis, you make the predictions, and then next you perform experiments, make more observations, because this is true. Now look at this in this sense. When you observe something, as a scientist, you are being curious, and then you form the hypothesis and you make predictions. This is exactly what you will do. And then after you have made predictions, you will perform experiments and you will make more predictions, because now you have more data. You now have a more clearer vision as to what is happening. So your level of making the observations increases after you have performed the experiments. And then you have the results, and then these results might not be consistent with the predictions, because when you predict something, it doesn't necessarily mean it is in that way. You can predict something as being this. After you found the results, you find it that it is not what you thought. And then after that, what happens now? The results are consistent with the predictions, because now you have carried more and more experiments, and the more you make these experiments, the more you become closer with your predictions. So what happens after? Contributes to body of knowledge. So it will contribute, because science, chemistry is a very big body. It's a body of knowledge. Whatever that you predict and whatever experiments that you perform in order to justify your predictions adds to the body of knowledge, and so on. And then once it is added to the body of knowledge, it goes back to a hypothesis and make predictions. Because now, remember, we said when we explained in the previous slide, let me just quickly come here. Sorry, yes. We said, okay, no, this is not the slide. We said the path of discovery that leads to question and observations, to a law or hypothesis, to theory, combined with the experimental verification of the hypothesis and any necessary modification of the theory, is called the scientific method. So remember, this is a journey that one takes. Right, and then once you contribute to the body of knowledge, what happens? We take this route. Much additional testing yields constant observations. This is true. The more you make these experiments, much additional testing, which is the you are testing in terms of the experiments, yield constant observations. And then secondly, we can say the observations becomes law, or the hypothesis becomes the theory. So from the contribution to the body of knowledge, either what you have as the understanding of whatever that you are studying, that can become an observation which will become a law, or it can just be a hypothesis which becomes a theory. So if it is just a theoretical statement, it simply means there will still be more people that comes after you are gone, or maybe you will have some time in order to verify whether your theory stands or not. But if there is much additional testing that yields constant observation, then the observations that you make becomes law. This is very important. All right, now let us look at the domains of chemistry. Chemists study and describe the behavior of matter as something that occupies space and displays the properties of mass and inertia, and energy in three different domains. So Chemistry is the study that describes the behavior of matter and energy in three different domains. So there are three different domains of matter and energy in chemistry, which is the macroscopic view, that which you can see, and we have the microscopic view, the world of the very small, the infinitesimal, that which you cannot see, and the symbolic. So we represent things in a symbolic way. These domains provide different ways of considering and describing chemical behavior. Very important. We are saying these domains, which are macro, micro, and symbolic, provides different ways of considering and describing chemical behavior. Macro is a Greek word that means large. So when we say something is macro, it's large, it's something that you can see with your eyes. Okay, the macroscopic domain is familiar to us because it deals with that which we can see. It is the realm of everyday things that are large enough to be sensed directly by human sight or touch. In daily life, this includes the food you eat and the breeze you feel on your face. The macroscopic domain includes everyday and laboratory chemistry, where we observe and measure physical and chemical properties such as the density, solubility, and flammability. Micro comes from the Greek and means small. Infinitesimal, the world of the very small. Right. Okay, sorry. The microscopic domain of chemistry is often visited in the imagination. I think they imagined atoms because of this. Alright, some aspects of the microscopic domain are visible through standard optical microscopes, for example, many biological cells. More sophisticated instruments are capable of imaging even smaller entities such as the molecules and atoms. However, most of the subjects in the microscopic domain of chemistry are too small to be seen even with the most advanced microscopes and may only be pictured in the mind. This is a risky study to do in chemistry. Other components of microscopic domain include the ions and the electrons, protons and the neutrons, and chemical bonds, each of which is far too small to see. The symbolic domain contains the specialized language used to represent the components of macroscopic and microscopic domains. Chemical symbols, such as those used in the periodic table, chemical formulas, and chemical equations are part of the symbolic domain. It is very important that we understand this. Please, it is very, very important. Let me go back. However, most of the subjects in the microscopic domain of chemistry are too small to be seen even with the most advanced microscopes. So they are saying most of the subjects in the microscopic, the very small domain of chemistry are too small to be seen even with the most advanced microscopes and may only be pictured in the mind. Here? Okay. Other components of the microscopic domain includes the ions and the electrons. So, do you mean to tell me that the ions, electrons, protons, neutrons, and chemical bonds are in the microscopic view and they are so small that even with advanced microscopes that we cannot see them? It's something that we have to imagine in our minds. Then how did we know the ratios that are required in order for the reaction to take place? How did we know and establish the valence shell electron pair repulsion theory in this? How did we know the angles through which these atoms have to combine in order to form a chemical bond? How did we come to know the amount of energy that is needed in order for the reaction to take place? If these things, if these microscopic substances that we are speaking about, they are so small that even with the most advanced microscopes, we cannot see them. We have to picture them in our minds. Let's read this again. However, most of the subjects in the microscopic domain of chemistry are too small to be seen even with the most advanced microscopes and may only be pictured in the mind. Other components of the microscopic domain include ions, electrons, protons, and neutrons, and chemical bonds, each of which is far too small to see. Okay, that's fine. They are not saying that even with the most advanced microscopes we cannot see this. They are saying other components. So they are these ones, electrons, protons, neutrons, and chemical bonds, they are not included in the microscopic domain of chemistry, where we are saying they are so small. Even with the most advanced microscopes, we cannot see them. We just have to imagine them in our minds. These ones are not included. It is true that they are in the world of the very small, the microscopic view, but when it comes to ions, electrons, protons, neutrons, and chemical bonds, we are able to see them via the microscope that is very advanced. And if this was not possible, many of the things that I have said would have not been possible. Right. The symbolic domain contains specialized language used to represent components of the macroscopic and microscopic domains. And these macro and micro domains that we are speaking about here are the ones that we can see either with our eyes, or either we can see in the world of the very small using the microscopes that are advanced, and they allow us to see these microscopic elements such as what now? The electrons, protons, neutrons, chemical bonds, and so on. Chemical symbols such as those used in the periodic table, chemical formulas, and chemical equations are part of the symbolic domain, as are the graphs, the drawings, and the calculations. These symbols play an important role in chemistry because they help interpret the behavior of the macroscopic domain in terms of the components of the microscopic domain. One of the challenges of students learning chemistry is recognizing that the same symbols can represent different things in the macroscopic and microscopic domains. And one of the features that makes chemistry fascinating is the use of the domain that must be imagined to explain behavior in a domain that can be observed. A helpful way to understand the three domains is via the essential and ubiquitous substance of water. That water is a liquid at moderate temperature and will freeze to form a solid at lower temperature and boil to form a gas at higher temperatures. These are the three phases of water. They are all macroscopic observations. These are the observations that we can see with our very eyes. All right, let me just do this, guys, and I will be back. Okay, let's continue. I don't know where I left off, but I think we were somewhere around here. So chemical symbols such as those used in the periodic table, chemical formulas, and chemical equations are part of the symbolic domain, as are the graphs, the drawings, and the calculations. These symbols play an important role in chemistry because they help interpret the behavior of the macroscopic domain in terms of the components of the microscopic domain. So we are simply just saying here that which happens in the world of the microscopic view has an impact, or is exactly that is happening in the macroscopic view. One of the challenges for students learning chemistry is recognizing that the same symbols can represent different things in the macroscopic and the microscopic domains. And one of the features that makes chemistry fascinating is the use of the domain that must be imagined to explain the behavior of the domain that can be observed. And we spoke about this in the previous slides. And we even said that even with the most advanced microscopic inventions, we are unable to see this. You just have to use your imagination. A helpful way to understand the three domain is via the essential and ubiquitous substance of water. That water is a liquid at moderate temperatures and will freeze to form a solid at lower temperature and boil to form a gas at higher temperatures. The macroscopic observations, because these are the things that we can see. We have water as a liquid, we can see it. I'm taking this water, put it inside of a fridge and decrease the temperature, it freezes to an ice. I take the very same ice, put into a pot, increase the temperature, and when it reaches 100 degrees, a liquid converts to a gas. We can see all these three phases, right? But some properties of water fall into the microscopic domain. What cannot be observed with the naked eye? Very, very important. So that which we see in the macroscopic view, that which is visible, has the macroscopic view and the microscopic view. For example, they say here, but some properties of water fall into the microscopic domain. So the properties of water is a liquid in the macroscopic view, but the properties of water is a microscopic view that requires that you go into the world of the very small in order to see what is happening in terms of the properties of water. So the properties of water, it's not something that can be interpreted in the macroscopic view, it's something that can be interpreted in the microscopic view of analysis, right? That which we cannot see with the naked eye. The description of water as comprising of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, and the explanation of freezing and boiling in terms of the attractions between these molecules is within the microscopic arena. And this is a point worthy of noting. The description of water as comprising 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom as a molecule, remember, and the explanation of freezing and boiling in terms of the attraction between these molecules. So freezing and boiling in terms of the attraction, it's something that has to be interpreted in the microscopic view, the microscopic arena. The formula H2O, which can describe water as either the macroscopic or microscopic level, is an example of a symbolic domain. So whenever we are speaking of H2O as a molecule, we are therefore looking at an example of a symbolic domain, because this is a symbol. H2O is a symbol. The observations of H2O as a gas and H2O as a solid and H2O as a liquid for a liquid are all the symbolics. So when we say the abbreviation G, which stands for gas, and S, which stands for solid, and L, which stands for a liquid, are also symbolic. So this is a symbolic representation. So I think we get a glimpse as to what the domains of chemistry are all about. Now the very last slide. Now let's go to the very last slide. So this is the slide that we have, and we can see the 3 phases of water. So remember, this is symbolic level, or the symbolic representation. Let me just go back. These are the symbolic way of representation. Let me just take you back again. Where did we read that? Here it is. The three domains: macro, micro, and symbolic. So this is a symbolic way of looking at these things. So we have the symbolic way of looking at water. And what is this? This is a molecule of water, and this is something that we cannot see in the macroscopic view. We cannot see this bond of two hydrogens bonded with one oxygen atom in fixed ratios. This is something that can be seen and observed in the microscopic view. The same with this, the same with that. So these are the three states of water. And I want you to notice something which is worthy of noting here. Water in a gaseous phase, because it's now a gas. Remember, the gas will fill up the container, so the atoms are freely, or in this case the molecules are freely to move around this circular shape, so they are far apart from one another. That is to say, the bonds that holds the water molecule together is broken down and they are able to move because of high kinetic energy. And here, water as a solid, they are a little bit attracted to one another. The intermolecular forces, okay, let me just leave that one, we will talk about that. So we are saying that they are a little bit closer with one another because H2O is a solid. But in a liquid, you can see that in a solid they are tightly held to one another. In a liquid, they are closer to one another, but the bond is not as strong as in a solid. This is the right way of looking at these three molecular representations in different phases. Very, very important. So we can have water here as a liquid, as you can see, and we can have water here as a solid, as you see, and we can have water here, a molecule, as a gas. Very, very important. And then let's read what they have to say here. Moisture in the air, iceberg, and the ocean represent water in the macroscopic domain. Because remember, we can see this. Remember, we can see this. This is within the macroscopic view or the macroscopic domain. At the molecular level, the microscopic domain, gas molecules are far apart and disorganized. This is exactly what we saw. Solid water molecules are closer together and organized. That's what we said. And liquid molecules are closer together and disorganized. That's what we saw. The formula H2O symbolizes water and gas, solid, and liquid symbols in its phases. These are the three phases of H2O. Note that clouds are actually comprised of either very small liquid water droplets or solid water crystals. Gaseous water in our atmosphere is not visible to the naked eye. This is true, although it may be sensed as humidity, and then credit to Eva that took the picture there. So this is just a brief summary of what we will be looking at in chemistry. This lays the foundation for us, and I want to thank you guys so much for the tutorial. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next tutorial.